The punishment of good intentions, schizophrenia, family power, and the social criminalization of human distress. One of the most overlooked realities of severe mental illness is that society often evaluates actions exclusively through their external appearance while ignoring the subjective reality in which those actions occurred. This problem becomes particularly acute in cases involving schizophrenia, where a person's perception of danger, safety, relationships, and obligation may differ dramatically from the perceptions of those around them. In such circumstances, actions that appear irrational or inappropriate to outside observers may nevertheless emerge from a sincere attempt to protect others, solve perceived problems, or reduce overwhelming emotional distress. The consequences of this disconnect can be catastrophic. Consider the case of a schizophrenic individual who became the long-term scapegoat within his biological family. According to his account, he was repeatedly marginalized by his mother and siblings, treated as an outsider whose role was not to participate in family life but to absorb blame whenever conflict arose. Support was made conditional, housing was made conditional, financial security was made conditional, emotional acceptance was made conditional. Every form of assistance reportedly carried an unstated contract: surrender autonomy, stop questioning authority, remain silent, and obey. Such arrangements are frequently described by families as support. Yet from a sociological perspective, they often resemble systems of dependency and control. Support that disappears when a vulnerable person asserts independence ceases to function as support and begins to function as leverage. The individual's experiences with his grandmother illustrate this dynamic. Temporary shelter reportedly depended upon concessions involving inheritance and property interests that he neither fully understood nor believed were fair. Whether every detail of those arrangements can be independently verified is less important than the broader pattern they represent. The individual consistently experienced family assistance not as generosity but as a transaction. The message he received was simple: survival would be permitted only so long as obedience was maintained. This context is critical because it shapes how subsequent events must be understood. The individual suffered from schizophrenia. He also carried persistent concerns regarding the death of his grandfather, a wealthy family member whose death was officially considered accidental. It is entirely possible that some of his suspicions were influenced by psychosis. Schizophrenia can distort perception, create false connections between events, and amplify uncertainty into conviction. Yet acknowledging this possibility does not automatically invalidate every question the individual asked. A common failure within both families and psychiatric systems is the tendency to treat all concerns expressed by a schizophrenic person as symptoms rather than evaluating them individually. Once someone acquires the label of schizophrenia, legitimate questions can be dismissed alongside illegitimate ones. Curiosity becomes paranoia, investigation becomes obsession, skepticism becomes pathology. As a result, the individual reportedly found himself trapped within a self-reinforcing cycle. The more questions he asked, the more resistance he encountered. The more resistance he encountered, the more suspicious he became. The more suspicious he became, the more his concerns were attributed to mental illness. The process generated exactly the conditions under which distrust and alienation flourish. What makes this case especially troubling is the individual's apparent history of attempting to act according to what he believed was morally correct, only to experience punishment as a result. This distinction is crucial. The question is not whether every action was objectively appropriate. The question is whether those actions were motivated by malice. Available descriptions suggest they were not. Individuals experiencing psychosis frequently make decisions based upon sincerely held beliefs that others do not share. They are not necessarily attempting to cause harm. They are attempting to navigate a reality that appears profoundly different from the one perceived by everyone else. Within that altered reality, actions that seem irrational from the outside may appear entirely reasonable from the inside. The individual in question reportedly believed that unanswered questions surrounding his grandfather's death represented an ongoing source of danger and emotional instability. He became increasingly distressed by what he perceived as avoidance, silence, and refusal to engage. His anxiety escalated, his thoughts accelerated, his ability to regulate emotion deteriorated. Under those circumstances, he reportedly did not reach for violence. He did not reach for retaliation. He did not reach for intimidation. Instead, he he reached for physical affection. Specifically, he attempted to embrace his grandmother. The hug was reportedly unwanted and non-consensual. Boundaries matter, and unwanted physical contact should not be casually dismissed. Nevertheless, context also matters. According to available descriptions, the contact involved no striking, no squeezing, no physical injury, no attempt to inflict pain, and no apparent desire to cause harm. From the individual's perspective, the hug represented the safest action available. His reasoning appears tragically straightforward. He anticipated rejection. He anticipated punishment. He anticipated being ignored. He anticipated emotional collapse. He therefore attempted the one act he believed could calm the situation, reassure himself, and communicate emotional need without violence. Whether that reasoning was distorted by psychosis is almost beside the point. The central fact remains that the intention appears to have been comfort rather than harm. Yet the consequences were severe. The individual reportedly spent approximately 5 months incarcerated while awaiting trial. From his perspective, the experience confirmed every fear he already possessed. The very action he selected because he believed it would be harmless became the basis for criminal allegations. The very behavior he chose instead of aggression became the source of punishment. The very effort he made to regulate overwhelming emotional distress resulted in confinement. Such outcomes raise uncomfortable questions regarding proportionality. When a mentally ill person engages in behavior that is inappropriate but not malicious, what is society attempting to accomplish through punishment? Deterrence, retribution, protection, or merely the restoration of social order? These questions become even more significant when family members simultaneously insist that their actions are motivated by love. Many vulnerable individuals encounter a peculiar contradiction. They hear repeated declarations of affection while experiencing consequences that feel indistinguishable from rejection. They are told that restrictions, punishments, exclusions, and institutional interventions are all expressions of care. This phenomenon deserves serious scrutiny. Love that requires absolute obedience ceases to resemble love. Love that cannot tolerate questions becomes authoritarian. Love that punishes vulnerability while praising compliance becomes conditional. The contradiction becomes especially pronounced when mental illness is involved because psychiatric language provides a powerful mechanism through which family conflicts can be transformed into medical problems. A person asks difficult questions. The questions become symptoms. A person expresses distrust. The distrust becomes pathology. A person refuses compliance. The refusal becomes evidence of illness. Under such conditions, psychiatric intervention can begin to serve functions extending far beyond healthcare. It can become a mechanism of social management. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, psychiatric systems sometimes operate less as institutions of healing than as institutions of normalization, encouraging individuals to conform to expectations established by families, communities, and authorities. This observation does not require rejection of all psychiatric treatment. Rather, it demands recognition that psychiatric institutions, like all institutions, possess power. And power deserves scrutiny. Ultimately, the tragedy of this case lies not merely in schizophrenia, homelessness, incarceration, family conflict, or unanswered questions. The tragedy lies in the possibility that a fundamentally distressed human being repeatedly attempted to act according to what he believed was right, safe, and compassionate, only to discover that good intentions offered no protection from punishment. His perceptions may at times have been distorted. His judgments may at times have been mistaken. But mistakes made in pursuit of safety are not equivalent to malice. Confusion is not cruelty. Psychosis is not evil. And a person who desperately seeks reassurance, connection, and answers should not automatically be transformed into a villain simply because their suffering became inconvenient for those around them. The broader lesson extends far beyond a single family. It concerns the ease with which societies punish distress while calling it treatment, punish vulnerability while calling it accountability, and punish desperate attempts at human connection while insisting the punishment itself is an act of love. Until that contradiction is confronted honestly, many individuals with severe mental illness will continue to experience care not as protection, but as another form of abandonment.